Welcome to the next lesson in Introduction to Programming and App Design. In this lesson, we're going to learn about something new we call responsive auto layout. So responsive auto layout is the process that allows your iPhone app or your iOS app to automatically size itself to make the best use of the space available without knowing ahead of time exactly what kind of space you're going to have. So for example, my simulator is currently set to an iPhone 6s, which has lots of space. So what I want is for this picture that you see right in the middle of the screen to sort of be as large as it can possibly be. Now you do see some white space both above and below this picture, but it can't really get any bigger than it is, because if it did, it would get stretched and distorted. We call this aspect ratio, which means that we don't stretch a picture in such a way that the picture gets distorted. So, what does auto layout mean? Well, watch what happens when I simulate what would happen if I turned my phone on its side. So I'm going to rotate my phone to the right. By going to the hardware menu and choosing rotate right. Now, did you notice that the picture shrank? The button stayed centered within the middle of the phone, and the label also stayed centered within the middle of the phone. And if I rotate left back, again, the picture grew to fill the available space, but my button stayed here at the top with the label just below it. This is responsive auto layout in action, and it requires the use of something we call constraints. So let's see how we go ahead and do that. Switch to Xcode or open Xcode if you haven't already. And in Xcode, you're going to need to create a new project. Now you're going to notice that I'm about to activate a new feature in these videos. So what I've got now is a focus around where my mouse is that should make it easier for you to follow the mouse. In addition, watch what happens when I left click, which you should do on the file menu. Did you notice the little red dot that appeared around my mouse? That means that I left clicked my mouse button. Watch as we go along, and you'll see that if I'm ever called to, there will be a different color for double clicking and for right clicking. Okay, I'm going to go to the project menu, and again, watch for that red dot that appears. That's your cue that I've just left clicked the mouse. There we go. Okay, now I don't actually need to, but again, just so you can see those red dots so you know what I'm doing, I'm going to left click on application, and then left click again on single view application. And finally, I'm going to left click on the next button. Now, for this project, we're going to call this ThreeVertical, because we're going to have 3 vertically stacked objects in our iOS app. And then I'm going to click Next. And now you should be storing your projects someplace convenient. I've created a folder called Xcode Projects that I've put in my Documents folder so that all my projects don't get in the way of each other. Once you're done with that, once you've selected the location, come down here and click the Create button. Alright, now I'm going to rearrange my window here, so I'm going to drag my Xcode window up here so it fills this space, and then I'm going to leave a little bit of space at the bottom when I resize this window. That is, if it will let me resize it. There we go. Okay. Leave some space at the bottom because later on there's going to be some stuff down here at the bottom that you need to see, and I want to make sure it doesn't get cut off in the video. Okay, now in order to see our storyboard, we click the main storyboard option here in the project navigator. Okay, so now we're looking at our main storyboard, and I'm going to make my objects here take up a little bit more space so that it's easier to see. And what I'm going to do, what we've just done actually, is we've just finished part 1, which is creating the project. Now we're beginning part 2, which is we're going to center the top object. So first I have to find my buttons in my object library here. When I found my button, I'm going to left click and drag that button over to my window here. Now I want you to notice something. As I drag over the center of the storyboard, a blue line appears. That's a guideline that tells me that my object is right in the middle of the storyboard right now. And then I'm going to follow that line up until I see my next guideline. And that is the recommended top of the storyboard where I should drop my object. Now, if you didn't quite hit those guidelines, drag your button away and try again until you see both blue lines at the same time. Let go, and you've positioned your object. Now, what we want to do though is we want to make it so that this button will stay stuck to the top of the screen no matter which way I turn or flip my phone, and it will always remain centered left to right here within my available space, no matter how big or small my iOS device is, and no matter which way I turn the iOS device. To do that, we're going to have to use something that's located down here towards the bottom of the screen. These little tools down here, there's 4 of them at the bottom corner of your window. The one I want is the one that says Align, and it's got these 2 little symbols here with a bar on the side. I'm going to click the Align button, and when I do, I'm going to see this pop-up window. I'm going to check the horizontally in container. What I'm saying is that I want this object to stay in the horizontal side to side center of my container, and then I'm going to click Add One Constraint. And when I've done that, I'm going to see this nasty orange-red line. The question is, what is this red line and how do I make it go away? Well, this red line is telling me that I've put a constraint on, but I haven't put all my constraints on. And I need to constrain my object enough that iOS knows what to do with it. And that generally requires that you have at least 2 constraints. Sometimes you need to have more, but usually you have to have at least 2. So again, I'm going to come down here to this section at the bottom corner. Only this time, I'm going to choose the pin option. The pin option is how we get objects to stick in a certain place. So I'm going to click Pin. And then here, I'm going to choose from these options that I want to pin it so it's 8 pixels. You notice it already has 8 filled in from whatever is above it. By clicking this little red line right here between the square and the space above it, I'm saying keep 8 pixels from the nearest neighbor. Well, what's the nearest neighbor? In this case, the nearest neighbor is really the top here of my storyboard. And then I'm going to add one constraint. And when I do that, notice that now I've got a blue line here because it's happy. This object is now going to stay in place. And let's watch what happens when we go ahead and run our simulator. And then we're going to test this out by running our project here, which should come up any second, and test it by rotating the object. Oops, I chose a giant phone here. I need to change this. Choose an iOS device, and I want to choose, whoops, oh no, it's all gone wrong. Okay, let's go back. I want to choose the iPhone 6S and then run my project. And because I've changed the phone here, when the project runs, as soon as I see my simulator come up here, so I'm going to help it along and jump to the simulator. There, I may need to resize the scaling here. Okay, apparently it remembered my previous scaling, so we're okay. Now, so far this is nothing new, except that notice my button is exactly in the center, and watch what happens when I rotate right. And notice the button stayed in the center. rotate left, and it stays in the center. Okay, so if you've done this, then you have completed part 2, centering your first object. All right, now what are we going to do? Now we're going to put a label on, which is going to be our third object. So we're going to drag a label, and we're going to again use that center guideline, and we're going to place it just below the button. Now notice that at a certain point, if I'm moving it around here, I see a blue line appear just above label and below button, which is telling me that this is the correct position. Oops, I want to get the blue centered line. Oops. So notice that I accidentally got mine lined up here on the left side of the button. That's okay, because we're going to fix that by just picking the object up, dragging it again, and it may take a few tries until you get it right in the center. Oops, I did it again. Let me try that one last time. Click. And there we go. I've got it centered. Now, I want to show you what happens if you don't use constraints. So, you don't have to actually do this, but it won't hurt to do it. Let's run your app here. Now watch what happens. Remember, I've put constraints on the button, but not on the label. So watch, what's the first thing that happens? Did the label actually show up in my storyboard? Where is my label? It's just below my button. So why isn't it below it right now? Well, if I drag my iPhone here and sort of place it over my storyboard, you'll notice that the label is sort of positioned where my label is sitting in the storyboard, whereas my button has moved over so that it's in the center. Now watch what happens when I rotate my phone. Notice that the label came over further here because my area here got wider. And my button moved over so it stays centered. So our goal now is to make it so that when I rotate my phone, the label stays centered under the button. Well, how do we do that? Just like we did before, first we're going to go down here and click my alignment tool and say horizontally centered in container, add one constraint, and then I'm going to pin it, clicking my other little notch there, and pin it to its nearest neighbor. Well, what's its nearest neighbor? It's the button. That's the thing that's just above it. And I'm going to add one constraint, and I get my blue lines here, and now I'm ready to run my app again. Okay, and now notice that the label and button are both centered, and if I rotate my phone, they stay centered. So we've successfully created some constraints to keep my button and label centered no matter what size iOS device I have and no matter which way I turn it. Okay, now for these next steps, we're going to want to put an image into our project, and that's going to mean that we're going to need an image. So what we're going to do is make sure that you're logged in to the MiraCosta website. Go over to your profile picture here and click on it. And when you do, you're going to be prompted with the option to store your image. I'm going to put it right in my Documents folder. And notice it has my name, last name first. I'm going to click Save. You shouldn't have to do that because I already did this once. Okay, I've just saved my image. Now I'm going to switch back to Xcode. Alright, now what I need to do is I need to add that image to my project. I'm going to do that by going to the File menu and do Add Files to ThreeVertical. Okay, now I need to find my image, and I know that I put it in my Documents folder, so I'm going to click the Documents shortcut here, and there's my image at the top. Now this is very important. It should already be checked, but if it's not, make sure this box next to Destination that says Copy Items if needed is checked. You always want that box checked. And then click the Add button. And you'll actually notice that there's a new item here called Assets, and in there you'll find your picture. but more importantly, Xcode provides an easy way for you to get to your picture. So, over here in the utilities section, there is a tiny little divider, or a tiny little icon here that looks sort of like a picture icon. If you click that, that is the media library. So if you have any sounds, movies, or images, they will appear here in your media library, and then you can use that to drag them into your project. So I'm now going to click and hold on my photo, and I'm going to drag it over here. Now don't worry exactly where you put it. Anywhere will do. So I'm going to sort of put it over here. Okay, I've now placed my image. What we want to happen, though, is we want the image to grow to fill all this available space around it without distorting it. And in order to do that, I need to change one of its attributes. Remember, this is the Attributes Inspector, and one of its attributes is in the View section, Mode. Right now it's set to center. I'm going to change it to Aspect Fill. Be careful you don't choose Aspect Fit. Oh, I'm sorry, Aspect Fit, not Aspect Fill. So we're going to do Aspect Fit. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the little top handle here at the center of my picture, click and hold, and I'm going to drag that up until I see that blue guideline below label. Then I'm going to grab the center left handle and drag to the left. Notice my picture got bigger as I did that a little bit until I see the left guideline. Then I'm going to drag my picture to the right until I see the right guideline. And I'm almost done. This time I'm going to drag the bottom handle, and notice there it goes. The picture is getting much bigger now until I see the bottom guideline. Okay, so what I've done now is I've made it so my picture is going to the guidelines on all four sides, where the top guideline is the bottom of my label object. But what I haven't done is made any constraints for my object. So this isn't really covered in the PDF, but let's just see what happens if I run my app without putting constraints on my image. Let's see what we get. Notice that my image is cut off here. And that's not good. That's not what we want. We want the image to fill all this available space and not be cut off. Constraints are what's going to make that happen. So, click back on your project here. Go down to the Constraints icon, and we want the Pin option this time. Make sure you can see that little pin icon there. Okay. We're going to click Pin, and this time we're going to pin all four sides because we want to pin the top here to the bottom of my label. We want to pin the left to the left edge of my storyboard, pin the right to my right edge of my storyboard, and the bottom to the bottom of my storyboard. So I'm going to be adding 4 constraints this time. But I've got angry red lines again. Now, this happens when you create constraints and Xcode isn't quite sure how to fulfill all of the constraints that you've put in. They may have conflicting information, they may not agree with each other, and it wants you to deal with it. Well, notice up here we can see a view controller scene, and there's this little red arrow. We're going to click that, and this is going to take us to a screen that reveals the problems we have with our constraints. And if you see this red sort of stop sign shaped symbol here, looks like, if you look closely, it's sort of shaped like a stop sign. You're going to click on the little stop sign, and you should see, whoops, if I can hit it, something that allows us to change any issues that have come up. And I have one that says change priority. So I'm going to click that. And then notice no layout issues. So by clicking that, I cleared up any constraint problems that I had. So now I can run my app here. And let's see how it works. Okay, this is good so far. Now my app is showing that I've got a button, a label, and I've got my image here centered. And now I'm going to go to my hardware menu and rotate my phone to the right. And there we go. My image shrank down to fill the available space. I'm going to rotate it back to the left, and there it grew back into shape. So my app is working flawlessly. Now, it's very possible that as you are following this tutorial, your app went off the rails. My best advice for this one is you're better off deleting your project and starting it over again if something went wrong. Just follow the video again. If you get stuck again, pause the video and pause wherever you got stuck and click the Request Help button. Thank you very much. Good luck.